Hello everyone, welcome back to The Budget Sportsman. Thank you so much for joining me on today's video where we're going to be talking about the XOP Mondo saddle. Now a little bit of background before we dive into the review. Last year I made a review of the XOP Renegade saddle along with the Edge platform. And in that video I said it was probably the most budget friendly or the cheapest way that you could get into saddle hunting. And the reason for that is the prices kind of varied on the two products, but if you bought the Renegade saddle in a combination with the Edge platform, you could get them for just $200. And that was a pretty good value considering most saddles alone are $200 and most platforms alone are around $200. But to get a saddle, platform, and the ropes for $200 was a pretty incredible value. Now, the Mondo saddle is coming in these days at $150. And while that still is a pretty good value for a saddle that comes with all of the ropes and carabiners that you need to get started, I can't see anywhere on XOP's website where you can buy it with the Edge platform as a combination for a great deal. So if you want to go buy the Edge platform alone, it's $150. The saddle's $150. So now you're looking at a $300 combination rather than a $200 combination. Still probably a pretty decent value when you compare to other things on the market, but it is going to be a bit more expensive. Now the other thing is I also reviewed in the past the XOP Invader platform, and if you really want a nice platform, I'd consider upgrading from the Edge to the Invader platform if you're looking at an XOP platform. Now, let's get into the Mondo. Obviously, it does come here in its own little carry bag. It's kind of handy. It's got a nice little not climbing rated carabiner here. And I probably won't use this bag a whole lot, but it's kind of cool that it comes in a nice way to store everything. And the first thing you're going to see is three, well, you're not going to see three right now, but you're going to get three ropes. And they're all the same. And all of them have a carabiner on them. Now, one of the really nice upgrades over the Renegade last year is that last year they were very heavy steel carabiners that were included, and they were screw gate carabiners. These are a very nice lightweight carabiner, and they're auto locking carabiners, which is really handy, really cool. Something I've actually been wanting to upgrade some of my carabiners to for a long time, and so really awesome that it comes with these auto locking carabiners. Now I mentioned there's three ropes, and I mentioned this in my Renegade video. You may be a little confused, why three ropes? Well, you're going to need one for your tether, you're going to need one for alignments, and then a lot of saddles on the market today are going to come with an AM steel bridge. The Mondo saddle does not. It's going to expect you to use one of these ropes as your bridge as well. Now, something I should point out about these ropes is that they have a sewn eye on both ends, and so if you want a girth hitch, you can girth hitch either end, and then you've got a prusik and the carabiner as well, and the prusik loop is also a sewn loop as well. And so this is a 7mm rope, it's saying, rated for 3,500 pounds. It's got a little manufacturer code there on the prusik, and so that 7mm, I'm guessing this is probably 9mm rope if I was to have my best guess. So you've got 7mm prusik and 9mm for the ropes. Now, like the Renegade, the Mondo is kind of strappy. And the reason for that is, and it's one of probably their big selling points, is that this saddle is also rated to be a tree stand safety harness. And so you've got a bunch of extra straps that are going to be to go up over your shoulders and chest that are going to be to make this into a safety harness. All right, so I wanted to show you a little bit more about putting this saddle on from a wider perspective. I've got it on up over my shoulders, and then right here at your chest, you're gonna have a strap that goes across your chest. This is a plastic buckle that, if I'm being honest, is pretty cheap feeling, and that's very similar to the Renegade. That was one of the things I mentioned about the Renegade. But once you move down to the leg straps and your waist strap and everything, I do like the improvements that have been made here over the Renegade. You've got some really nice climbing rated buckles down here, and these all have their kilonewton ratings put right on them there, and easy to buckle in, easy to adjust the tension on them. And so these are going to be really good, strong buckles here on your waist or your leg strap, as well as you got a really nice, super big one here on your waist belt. Now, another thing to point out is over here on this side, you do have a tension release. What do they call these? If you were to fall out of your tree stand and you needed to take the tension off of your legs, there's a little strap here that you could use to do that, where you can put a foot loop down and put tension into your foot. And so that's girth hitched right to your saddle here. And so that's something you can remove if you want to, but it's a nice little touch that XOP has included that. Now, on the back here, I don't know if you can see this, but there is the attachment method right here if you wanted to use it as a tree stand safety harness. And then, of course, everything else you need to use it as a saddle is up front. Now, I wanted to give you an up-close view of the saddle here, and there's something I wanted to point out, And that is that most saddles on the market today are going to have two large sets of loops on each side for your bridge and then your lineman's loops. So here would be the ones that would normally be for your bridge. This would be your bridge right here, and you would connect your tether into your bridge and you would sit into that. And normally there'd be a second set of loops, either one here or something like this, and that would be where you'd set your lineman's belt, and that would be a separate connection from your bridge. Now there is a loop here, but that's all the bigger it is. Now, I am not a big fan of that, especially using for a lineman's belt, because that's something you're going to be putting on and off maybe in the dark as you're climbing up the tree, and that's going to be very hard to find in the dark. I really think this needs to be improved in future versions of the XOP saddle, something that's big and easy to clip into with your lineman's belt. Now, another thing to notice about this saddle is that all of the Molle Loops are sewn with really large open loops. This is great if you want to like hook a carabiner in there or you want to tie something around it, but if you want to slip a tri-glide through there to hold maybe a dump pouch on there, I don't really know, but I think you might have a little bit more of a hard time getting that to hold securely and firmly with that larger sewn Molle webbing. Now let's get into a tree and I'll give you some thoughts on comfort and usability of this saddle. All right, so now that I'm up in the tree, I have some thoughts that I want to give you. When I reviewed the XOP Renegade, I told you that you do get what you pay for, and while it's a really budget and affordable saddle, it's not going to be the best in some areas, and one of those areas is comfort. It's not that it's incredibly uncomfortable, but it's by far not the most comfortable saddle that I've ever sat in, and the same is really true of the Mondo. Now, one of the things that I think could really improve the comfort of this saddle, because I feel like it's actually very close, but it's just off a little bit. And one of the things that would really improve it is if you put an aftermarket bridge on this, which had some way, whether that's AM steel or Oplux, but had some way to adjust the tension up and down to get the right tension and the right position that you want on this saddle. So on my left side, I have the bridge girth hitched through that sewn loop, and I can sort of adjust that up and down on the bridge loop to sort of change the tension. But on this side, I've just got a carabiner, and right now it slides wherever it wants to go, and it's way up toward the top. And so I've tried raising my tether, I've tried lowering my tether, I've tried lengthening the bridge and shortening the bridge, and I just can't quite get the feel that I really want in this saddle. But I really think that if you change this out for an aftermarket bridge where you could adjust that tension up and down, I think you could actually get this saddle to feel pretty comfortable. There's a good even pressure on my backside. I'm just having a hard time getting it to feel the support that I want. And there are some pressure points. One thing I noticed is that it comes up kind of high up here in the front. Of course, right now I have my tether very high, so that doesn't help. And I kind of get a pressure up here almost into my ribs. And so that's something that you may need to play around with as well. Overall, I don't think it's terrible, but I think a couple of DIY upgrades could make this significantly better. Now, one problem with DIY upgrades is you sometimes end up taking a very inexpensive product and just turning it into a more expensive product by doing all these DIY upgrades. Another thing that I wanted to point out is the ropes. Now you can see here, I'm not on a huge tree, but I don't have a whole lot. I've only got about 4 inches remaining of slack in my tether here, or of extra room in my tether. So if I was going to go to any tree larger than this, I would run out of length on my tether really, really quickly. Meanwhile, on my bridge, I've got a lot of extra length here. And all of these ropes are exactly the same length, and I think that's a little bit of a downside. They are decent ropes, I like them, but I think over time you're probably going to find that you're going to want a little bit of a longer tether, maybe a different bridge, and maybe these ropes are going to work fine for your linemen. I'm not sure. Now, another thing I noticed, I got up in the tree just now, and I went to sit down, and the proof stick did not hold me. It slid down. Now, I think it's holding fine now. It's biting really well. I think it just needs to be, you need to be sure that it's properly dressed, everything's seated properly, and then give it a little tug to make sure it's biting before you put your full weight into it. I really don't have a huge safety concern. You do have this sewn eye down here, so that proof stick's not going to come all the way off, but it could be a little bit jarring if you start sliding down that rope. All right, so let's wrap up this video by talking about some of the pros and cons of this saddle. And I think the first and most obvious pro to this saddle is the price. Most saddles on the market today are $200. There's a few that are just under $200. So at $150, I think it's a decent value. You throw in 3 ropes and climbing rated carabiners that are auto locking, and really I think that just only improves and increases the value. Is it as cheap as the Renegade and Edge platform combination last year? No, it's not, but I think it is still a very affordable and budget way to get into saddle hunting, especially if you're a little bit onshore. And that brings me to the second big pro of the Mondo as well as the Renegade, and that is that it is included as a tree stand safety harness where you can clip into the back. And so again, if you're a little bit unsure about whether you want to hunt from a saddle or not, or maybe you jump back and forth a lot between saddle hunting and tree stand hunting, then the Mondo really could be right for you. Now, another pro that I hadn't originally considered is that as a tree stand safety harness, all of the straps that go over your shoulders also kind of double as suspenders. Now, a lot of the high-end companies are offering suspenders to go with their saddles these days, and guys are retrofitting their saddles with suspenders, but without spending any extra money, you really already kind of get them. And you can cinch them up to where they're actually going to support the weight of your saddlebags if you want to run ropes and gear and things that are hanging off of you. And those extra straps are going to actually help support the weight of the saddle without spending a lot of extra money. Now, what are some of the cons? Well, it's just really not the most comfortable saddle in the world. Again, I think you could do some DIY upgrades that are going to drastically improve that comfort. Another con is that the straps for the tree stand safety harness are not removable. They are sewn in. And so if you're looking for something that you can just take those off and use just the saddle without those straps because you're not into them, well, you're probably going to have to cut them off. Overall, though, my final conclusion is if you're new to saddle hunting and you want an inexpensive way to try it, or if you bounce back and forth between tree stands and saddles a lot, then the Mondo might be right for you. And I do think it's probably a decent upgrade over the Renegade. There's some nicer buckles. I like the attachment methods and the leg straps a little bit better. And those climbing rated carabiners are definitely a nice upgrade as well. So let me know what you think of the Mondo down in the comments. And until next time, remember to get off YouTube and get outdoors into God's great creation.